Good evening. Welcome to the October 8th, 2020 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. We're conducting this under the modified open meeting law rules. We have participation information posted on the website. I'll say that will probably be modified a bit, as it usually is, because Zoom doesn't necessarily work quite the way it would be best for us, but we'll do the best we can. I'm Bob Hassinger, chairman. You need the board members. Dave?
I'm here.
Justin's not here. Linda?
Here. I know we have people.
Probably.
Here.
Says he's not here. Chris.
Present.
And so we identify who else is here. Chris, you have the controls.
Yeah, do you want me to go through all of the panelists for tonight? Do you want me to go through all the panelists for tonight? There's quite a few, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're supposed to, I don't know what the governor wants us to do, but certainly we should try.
So we have Natalia Allward from staff.
Is it?
Jeff Walsh, Grave Engineering.
Here.
Bill McCusker, Zoning Board of Appeals.
I am here.
Peter Hangarani for High Point Estates.
Peter, do you hear us?
I believe Peter is on the call. My name is Don Bornstein. I'm Mr. Hangarani's attorney. I believe Peter is at least listening in, but
Stephen T. David, I believe also High Point Estates. Or sorry, 61 Maple.
The other one.
I'm here.
I have another identified as Peter Hangarani.
Which is muted.
Yep. There's a Joshua Lee Smith for 8 Millennium.
Good evening.
And that's it for who's on as panelists right now. We do have attendees as well, but I don't think we have to identify them.
Okay. First order of business is public input. This is where there's a chance to speak to the board about something that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who has something to say? First, if somebody that's listed under attendees wanted to speak,
So
what would
I'm monitoring both, so they can either there's the raise hand feature or in chat and Q&A. I'm monitoring all those channels, so whatever is most convenient for them, and I can.
So you'll let me know.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell with what I'm looking at, some of that. I don't think. All right. There appears to be no public input. I guess that we're going to move on to the draft decision. We only have 4 eligible to vote present at the moment.
Yeah, I do believe Justin Wood did send an email that he's running a little late.
Guys. Did that. Yeah. Maybe we should do some of the other business while we're waiting to see if he shows up. General business, bills. Did we have any bills? Bills. Minutes of previous meeting. No minutes of previous meeting. Staff report.
Yeah, so I do have a couple quick things to bring to the board's attention. So just last week, we did file the MS4 annual report, which is part of the stormwater requirements. So that's been completed in coordination with DPW and VHB, as well as Conservation Commission. Additionally, we did file paperwork, and we're kind of finalizing for approval for the FY19 historical inventory survey. So that was part of a MHC Mass Historical Commission grant, where we completed a review of historical properties, and we added a significant amount of those properties to our inventory, including we focused on some of the neighborhoods that were 1950s or earlier development, which recently came under that historical designation. And so that was really interesting to see kind of finalize. So hopefully that gets approved as the final report, and then we'll be finished up. So
Anything else? Staff
I believe that's it.
correspondence. Did anybody have anything in the correspondence to talk about? Apparently not.
Seems like not a lot has happened since we last met 1 week ago.
1 week ago. Let's see. Well, do we have any reports from planning board representatives on town? Yeah, we can see.
Can I go first?
Sure.
From the library building committee, I just finished the meeting. Things are progressing well. There seems to be some minor impacts. I checked with Andy, and he did confirm that that should not lead to any potential impacts from an end date perspective. The cost report, the job cost report was not published, but he indicated that we are still not tracking under the approved numbers for the overall project. But he's working on a few updates on that cost report and would be publishing that sometime soon. So once I have that, if I have an update, I will let you guys know.
Anybody with anything else? Okay.
That's one small update from the Town Administrator Screening Committee. The community survey just got put out there. I saw it on the Grafton Common website. I believe they intended to publicize it through the Grafton News, through presumably social media, possibly others. But anyway, it just went out this afternoon. I don't off the top of my head remember. I just glanced at it. I don't know what the deadline is.
Okay. Anybody else with anything?
I actually, just adding to staff report, I did have one other item I forgot to mention. As you all know, we passed the temporary outdoor seating and tents for a number of restaurants and businesses. John Allen, our economic development coordinator, is reaching out to them. As you remember, those permits expire on November 1st. Part of that discussion was that some businesses with the use of heaters or whatever other infrastructure may want to extend that deadline or just get a head start on the spring in terms of approvals. So we're reaching out to try and get an idea of where those businesses want to go. Obviously, I think if we are extending into the fall months much further, we will want to consider things such as snow, and in terms of heaters and tents, we'll need to get some kind of fire department commentary on these. But so it'll most likely be more of an intensive review than we did previously, but I just wanted to kind of bring that to the board's attention.
Anybody else? Anything on the discussion around Mill Redevelopment Overlay District?
No, so at the board's meeting a week ago, we did approve the the use of the LTA hours, so we will move forward on that, but there hasn't been any developments thus far.
Has that been communicated to CMRPC?
I have not had a chance to do that, but I will do that first thing on tomorrow.
Anything on subdivision rules and regulations update?
I have nothing further from last week.
Okay. Well, let's see. We have anybody here from the Millennium Drive case?
We do. Joshua Lee Smith is here representing 8 Millennium.
I guess I'd ask him whether he's okay with us doing this with 4, or whether he'd like us to wait until 5.
Hi, can folks hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So for this extension request, Chris, does this require 4 then?
So just Justin Wood did just sign on,
Perfect.
so that answers that.
Hello, Justin.
Good timing, Justin.
We've you can hear us. Can we hear you? How about if you there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, we have the 5. We've done just about everything down to the 7:30 except the Millennium Drive decision. We have a draft decision for that.
We do. Yeah, I can pull it up. I note that Mr. Smith did, or Attorney Smith did submit some corrections, which I have not been able to incorporate in the version that I'll pull up. But I saw no issue in his adjustments. I can go through those as well with the board.
Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Chances are he found at least a couple of things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he probably found more than I did. I only found 2 things to point out.
If we move right along, we can get this done by 7:30.
Close the recording. Roadside assistance
So
here for jumpstart, tire, and
So-
vehicle towing service.
So the first comment was the just correcting and making sure it was the commencement of work, not the completion of construction, which was, sorry, that's the background third pair. There's a couple mentions of it. The background third paragraph. We also pointed out that the title is registered marijuana dispensary changed to medical. The registered marijuana use was
Chris, something, we were getting some sort of, or I was getting some sort of major interference there.
sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, it went away. I'm not sure. It might be Mr. Hingarani because he popped up there and he's not muted.
I apologize, I didn't hear that, but yeah, so the first one was the RMD use. It was changed to medical in the second modification. So that's part of the title. There were a couple comments of commencement of construction versus completeness of, or completion of construction in the first paragraph. Some minor missing of a period. Again, the third paragraph, the completion versus commencement, and then the fourth paragraph, the RMD versus medical adult use cultivation, as well as in the header. And then finally, the last one was to strike the 26,100 square feet for the initial phase. That might have been a previous approval.
I can't hear you.
The striking of the 26,100 square feet.
Okay. Anything else?
No,
Yeah.
that's it.
Did anybody notice that that right under the background, talking about the original permit, it gives the date of September 27th, 2020, which actually should be September 5th, 2017, at least in the draft that was posted on the website that I'm looking at.
I totally missed that. Thank you, Dave.
And the last paragraph under background, just before section 2 submittals, the first sentence and the last sentence are contradictory. The first sentence says the public hearing was opened at our previous meeting and continued to this meeting. The last sentence says the hearing was closed at the previous meeting. So I think the first sentence of the hearing was not continued to October 5th, so that needs to be corrected.
Okay. Are there any other corrections? Questions? Or notes or anything? If not, anything before we move to a vote?
Nope.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve this extension as drafted with the modifications discussed.
Second.
Linda's. Again, I'm getting back. Maybe. I think it was probably. He just muted. I don't know why he's getting that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, well, 22 minutes passed, and hearings are scheduled for 1/2 past. Anybody have anything they want to cover before 1/2 past? Any ideas for what we can do with the next 7 minutes? No,
So I guess while we have the time, if I may, um, I think we have quite a few more attendees than we normally have tonight. So I'll just throw in another plug for our emergency rental assistance program that is still ongoing. So, that's a program that helps, especially residents that are affected by COVID and may be unable to pay rent. That is geared towards landlords and residents. So we've been doing a lot of outreach and have gotten some response, but there is still capacity with the existing program. So I highly encourage anyone who is struggling to make rental payments or knows of someone who is struggling to make rental payments in Grafton and has been affected to definitely reach out. That information's on the town website. You can also contact the planning department. I'll be happy to send that along to you. But it's a great program, and it'll help to alleviate some of those fiscal kind of impacts. So. Not 7 minutes worth, but that's what I got.
well, we'll consider this a 5-minute break. Okay. Zoom at 7:30.
Norm, you're on. Say something. Say something.
Good evening, this is Norman.
We're 5-minute.
The board's recessed until 7:30, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm on without the camera being on. And about a minute away from going on.
Patrick, just so you know, your audio's on.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
All right, it's 7:30. And go to the hearing for the determination of completeness, 40B development off Adams Road. I think we need to read the posting.
We do. I'm just pulling that up. Pursuant to the comprehensive permit issued by the Grafton Board of Appeals, Section 3, Decision A.8, dated December 24th, 2002, under MGL Chapter 40B, the Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on October 5th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. via Zoom conference to consider the status of completion of the High Point Estates subdivision roadways and infrastructure, and consider a recommendation to the Grafton Board of Selectmen to issue a warrant article concerning public acceptance by the town of the subdivision roadways and infrastructure at the fall 2020 town meeting, shown as Grafton Assessors Map 41, parcels 4 and 15, and Map 41 and parcel 4A. The applicant owner is Adams Road Trust of 51 Mount Joy Drive, Tewksbury, Mass. 01876. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-board for more information.
Okay. Chris, first, please explain why this is before us. I think it's the 40B.
Yep. So, so this is correct. This is a 40B development. And so in terms of that process, that is somewhat separate from what the board is reviewing tonight. The determination of completeness is a separate process, essentially looking at the subdivision road and that determining that it is complete and up to the subdivision rules and regulations standards. In discussing with town council, because it is a separate process, it was their recommendation that that be reviewed by the planning board, which is the typical issuing authority for subdivisions and typically oversees that process. Obviously, this is unique coming from a 40B, so we'll have to somewhat coordinate with the Zoning Board of Appeals. But I think in a way, it narrows the scope a little bit in terms of looking at the completion of the project in terms of the subdivision road and associated infrastructure that would become the purview of the town if accepted at town meeting to be transferred. So this is one step in the process to actual project completion. There's still quite a bit of process to go through in terms of town meeting warrant and still finishing up the Zoning Board of Appeals process. But we're just one piece of that larger puzzle. And at the recommendation of town council, that piece falls to us tonight. So
Laying out and clearing by the selectmen isn't, at least that's what has happened in every subdivision I've known of. My understanding of 40B was that all of our powers were subsumed by the ZBA, which would include this, and that's what I don't understand. I don't think that we've ever had this come this way on any other 40B.
So that was my initial reaction as well, but in reviewing the process with town council, they did recommend and felt that because it's the determination of completeness is more of a standalone type of procedure or process, that the planning board could oversee that. So again, I think we should look to the ZBA for some kind of direction, as they obviously were heavily involved in the initial approval, but ultimately it does come to the planning board, and it's the purview of the planning board for that specific process, the determination of completeness.
Well, I can see we have,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, I see we have you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just point out, I don't think we've had a 40B subdivision get to this point. So that may be one reason why we haven't done this before. And then the second thing is, I'll just add into what Chris is saying. I thought the town council was saying some things along the lines of, the whole process of acceptance of roads is really kind of defined at a different level than what is the rest of the planning board powers that are usurped over to the ZBA. And I can't remember her exact terms, but she was saying things along those lines, if I remember correctly.
Well, Chris, what do you want to tell us?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, that procedurally, that's what we're looking at. I know that Graves Engineering did provide a review of the infrastructure and roads to date, as well as their review of the determination of completeness materials. I believe there were some revised documents that were submitted kind of late this week, and I think Jeff Walsh had mentioned he likely would not be able to get to those before this meeting. I know I have not been able to review those revised materials, but that might be something that the board might want to take into consideration. But I don't know if Attorney Don Borenstein, if you want to kind of go into more detail and discuss the process. But that's kind of where I see it standing for tonight.
I'm happy to do that if you want to hear from me, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Don Bornstein. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicant in this matter, Adams Road, and its principal, Mr. Hingarani. My office is located at 12 Chestnut Street in Andover, Massachusetts. My office is Johnson and Bornstein. I'm happy to join you tonight. I'm glad to see the board holding its meeting in this way. I'll give you just a brief sort of timeline. Before I do that, I'll start by noting that I actually agree with the chairman on his understanding of the process. It was my position that this was something that did belong in front of the zoning board. In fact, back in March 11th, the application was filed for determination of completeness, and that was picked up ultimately by the zoning board. A lot has happened since March 11th in a lot of different ways, including in this matter. The zoning board did hold a meeting on June 11th, where they considered the request for the determination of completeness. We had a lengthy and I would say pretty constructive conversation during that meeting. About a month later, we received a follow-up letter from Dan Hill, the counsel for the zoning board, with a list of items that needed to be addressed before we returned to pick up that determination of completeness process again. We renewed our request for determination of completion about a month after that, August 28th. Mr. Hingarani, with some assistance from me and from the rest of his project team, filed a renewed request for the determination of completeness. Again, that's under subdivision regulation 3.3.11.2. And then I know the town's consultant, Mr. Walsh, who's with us tonight, picked that up. He's issued 2 reports or letter reports since then, one dated September 23rd, dealing with the status of construction completion for the project, and one dated this past Friday, October 2nd, dealing with his review of the as-built plans and the acceptance materials. I don't want to speak for Mr. Walsh. I'm sure he'll address the board. The construction completion report I thought was pretty thorough. We seem to be at an end point there with that September memo. There were a handful of items pointed out about the acceptance materials that needed some attention. Our project engineer, Pat Garner, who's also on the panel with us tonight, Pat picked that up and that same day turned it around back to Mr. Walsh with some updated materials, fixing some items that were called out in those acceptance plans and whatnot. We got those back late in the day to Mr. Walsh on Friday. I think that's what Chris is referring to. So that brings us here tonight. It had been my original expectation that we were returning to the zoning board to pick up the list that we had sort of compiled with them during our June meeting. In the interim between June and now, the call was made by town council, I think both council for the zoning board and town council for the town, directing that or concluding that it was a planning board matter. So this matter apparently has been referred to planning board, and we're happy to discuss it with the planning board.
How much is within our purview here? I noticed we have a number of written comments, for example, concerned with easements and drainage and condition of the project, the site, as well as what goes on within the roads, the rights of way.
Yeah, so I think my understanding is that the purview of the board for the determination of completeness is should be focused on the infrastructure that the town would acquire if town meeting were to vote to, and the select board were to vote to accept the roads. So essentially, if the maintenance of the roads and associated infrastructure were to become the town's purview, that's what we're reviewing. So things such as the drainage and infrastructure, the roadway improvements, those would come under the town's control. Some of the the stabilization of the site would be something that we'd want to look at, as well as but things like the actual construction of the units would not. That would be still part of the zoning board of appeals process, and some of those other kind of aspects that are outside of the actual determination of completeness review would be still part of the ZBA process. So it is a little bit overlapping, but
I'm aware that there are some people that are very concerned about the drainage overland, and some that are concerned about like driveways emptying onto the road and so on. That maybe we'll hear some about that from Jeff, but I don't know about some of those issues that I've seen people very concerned about. And I don't know where we get into that. I don't want us to do something we shouldn't. Several of the comments have suggested that the town, if and when it accepts this, will take some liabilities. I want to be sure that what we're doing is correct as far as the town is concerned.
yeah, I think some of the comments that I read were looking at potential of the icing during the winter, stormwater runoff during rain events, as well as some of the siltation flowing across properties during heavy rain events. I believe there has been some work to address that. I'm not sure the effectiveness of that. I don't know if that's something that we want to delve deeper into. But I do think that some of those things would be under the purview of the board, but other things such as that's where I think the scope is narrowed a little bit, but probably not by all that much.
Have all of the portable units been built?
My understanding is there's still one market rate and two affordable that need to be constructed.
And what does that say about the closing out of the project? I don't understand how that's going to resolve.
So I think the construction of the units, I think that would be more part of the 40B process and the zoning board of appeals. That's where I think that may fall a little out of the scope of the determination of completeness, but that's my opinion.
Bill, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, so Chris is correct. There's one market rate, two affordables left to be built. To be honest, Bob, I don't necessarily know what the right answer is, but I didn't think that completed construction of lots is really tied to the road acceptance process that we're in right now. So if this was a conventional subdivision and there were a number of lots that were not developed, would that impact this process in front of the planning board? I didn't think that they were necessarily related as long as the road was built and the top coat and the infrastructure, everything is all done. The fact that some of the lots weren't developed, I didn't think would be a factor, but I don't know. Clearly, we as a ZBA, at some point need to make sure those affordables get built. And I think that process falls on our lap.
Yeah, I want to be sure that we're doing the right things on that, because in a conventional subdivision, yes, you're correct. Often they're accepted without every single lot having been built out. But in this case, the affordable units are, as I understand it, are mandatory. That's part of what the thing is about. So I'd like to understand that while we're doing all this.
I understand and agree with your concern, Bob, and I don't necessarily know what the right answer is here.
Okay, well.
If I may, I have a question. I don't know if we have an answer for or if it affects us at all, but I do know there was at least some litigation being involved with regards to the High Point project and some Grafton residents. I don't know the outcome of that. I don't know any details. I don't know how much of any of that is public record or can be shared publicly. But does any of that litigation affect the road acceptance? Is the bottom line here I'm getting to. I don't know who can answer it.
I can,
Mr. Chair, but maybe now would be a good time for me to weigh in on some of that. So I think even with the determination by town council that sent this particular item to the planning board, I don't think there was any suggestion from town council that the zoning board was in essence passing the buck to the planning board for overseeing this 40B project. I think the 40B project clearly remains under the oversight, enforcement authority, et cetera, of the zoning board. And I don't think there's any suggestion, I think, by anyone on this meeting that that the planning board is sort of getting the baton passed to it. I think what town council, as I understood their determination, was that this narrow issue that's controlled by the subdivision regulations for issuing a determination of completeness, that narrow issue was properly before the planning board. Again, I disagreed with that, but we're happy to follow the process that the boards and legal counsel direct us to and see where that gets us. But I think that determination of completion process is a very narrow thing. It's really just a determination as to whether the infrastructure of the project, the roadways, the drainage, principally meet the standards set forth in the subdivision regulations that haven't been affected by the zoning board's 40B approval. So that I think is a narrow scope. Litigation amongst with other property owners, concerns about lot build out and unit construction, things that aren't covered by the subdivision regulations, I think are just not part of the process that we're in front of the planning board on. It seems a little artificial to me, but that's where we're at. And I think it's important for tonight's hearing that we stay within those confines.
The thing, if I recall correctly, I think there was a request for us to make a recommendation. That's beyond are the roads finished. You know, I'm thinking that depending on the answers to all of this, we may or may not be inclined to make a recommendation of acceptance. Bill.
Is Attorney Hill on? I see someone named Cindy Taylor Hill. Is that Dan Hill?
No, that's Norman.
Okay. Chris, did we hear from Dan? Is Dan not expected?
sorry, I did reach out to him today, and I may not have gotten the invite out to him in enough time.
Okay.
I thought he had planned on attending, but I may have miscommunicated that with him. So I apologize.
Yeah, I thought I did too. You know, to Justin Wood's point, I'll just say that there is a stop work order or cease and desist or something along those lines. I don't remember the exact terms from our zoning enforcement officer to the developer. One of the concerns is drainage and the flow of water across land onto neighboring properties, things along those lines. So to the extent that that ties into the overall drainage and infrastructure, it may or may not be related to the process we're here for tonight. And I'm not going to say any more than that. If I said more than I'm supposed to, because I'm actually a party to that action as well, and a member of the CBA.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is in terms of a target date for this action. Town meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, and this is not currently on the agenda for town meeting. I just looked at the town meeting warrant, and it's not there. So it would seem that there is a certain amount of time available to all of us collectively to iron out some of the questions and some of the details. I'm particularly concerned about the relationship between the towns accepting the infrastructure, roads and whatnot, and some of the ongoing issues that may have yet to be resolved. I would certainly prefer to recommend that the town accept this only when all of the known problems have been resolved, at least to the best of everybody's ability. So yeah, just in terms of timing, I don't think we're not under the gun here as far as I'm concerned. The next opportunity at town meeting will be May of next year. So that's that, just in terms of the timing of the roadway acceptance. Somewhat related to that, and with my open space and recreation plan hat on, I noticed in the materials posted to the website that there is some discussion of open space, and particularly a document of the grant of open space and some representation of open space on the acceptance plan. Now, to the best of my recollection, again here, the town's acceptance of open space at town meeting is entirely separate from the acceptance of the roadways and utilities. So, and as far as I know, the open space is really not on this board's agenda for tonight. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that that's going to be ultimately dealt with as a separate matter. But in connection with that, I did review the grant of open space and the legal description there. And that legal description appears to be somewhat different from the representation of open space shown on the acceptance plan. Jeff Walsh's memo referred to an updated legal description from this past June. I suspect the one on the website is an earlier version, and I would hope that the version that we'll ultimately use will be consistent. Yeah, I actually went through the meets and bounds and found several discrepancies.
Yeah, Linda.
Thank you. Another thing, reason why I don't think we're gonna get anywhere tonight is that normally when we look at accepting roads of a subdivision or something like that, we all along the time, throughout the whole building of it, have been kept up to date by Walsh, and we're aware of what's going on through the whole process. Issues come in front of us and things are always updated to us periodically. We're coming in cold on this. I don't really feel I have a handle on any of this to be able to really do anything with it tonight, except listen.
Yeah. No, I know that with what's before us so far, the last report from Graves, there was still a number of open issues there. And we won't have that tonight. We won't have that closure on that tonight. So all we could do would be to vote to not find completion of anybody wants. So I think we're certainly not going to get to town meeting. The warrant is closed, published. Also, I didn't see a petition for acceptance, which is customary in subdivision acceptances, but selectmen don't initiate. The planning board doesn't initiate that. The ZBA would initiate that. Customarily, there's a warrant article petition acceptance. I do have one other question. 40B lays out a lot of constraints for writing, zoning, all of that we know about putting the project in the hands of the ZBA rather than the planning board. But I've never seen anything mandating that the town accept any subdivision, including any D. I'm just curious about that. If the roads aren't satisfactory to the town, it's a town meeting. I've had town meeting turn down an acceptance because there were deficiencies. I just wonder about that. That's an interesting point that I've asked a few people a few times, And I've never heard it. If people get up at town meeting, they can just wait town meeting to not accept.
Right, and I think that absolutely could happen here, Bob, and I don't think that process changes at all by way of 40B, right? And I think that kind of ties, and I wish I had reviewed Attorney Kramer's notes that said, they should come to you, but I think it all kind of ties together in, at least in her opinion, that this is really the traditional process, and 40B doesn't change this traditional process, and that's why we're here. So, yeah, I mean, the same things you should be looking at for traditional subdivision you should be looking at here. The same things that could potentially take it off the rails, i.e. town meeting saying no. And I don't think there's any requirement anywhere that the town has to accept these roads, 40B or not.
Chris?
But that's my knowledge.
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate, I think as the discussion has gone, the ZBA process is still, although it is related to this, it's still going to be its own process and still needs to move forward. Town meeting acceptance, again, is a separate process that will need to move forward. But I think this is a step on the road there, looking at the determination of completeness. So I think this is a process and a forum to, before getting to town meeting and potentially having a denial, this helps to alleviate any of those potential issues and get those addressed before we even get to that stage. So this is somewhat a precursor, if I'm understanding the process. This is the precursor to getting on the warrant and moving forward.
But again, there was a mention of asking for us to make a recommendation, a positive recommendation. I don't think it's outside of, I think planning board or individual should certainly make a recommendation, a negative recommendation to town meeting. So we certainly as a board, if we are being asked to make a recommendation of some sort, we need to understand the whole thing and see where that might go. All that said, does anybody else have anything on this level before we hear anything? Jeff, are you ready, Rick? Jeff, go.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, my name is Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering, with an engineering consultant to the Planning Board and to the ZBA. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak at this level and not get into the details of construction just yet. I've been working on this project, High Point Estates, with the Zoning Board of Appeals through the entire construction phase, which is about 14 years now. There's been a lot of changes, discussion. I've sat through numerous planning board meetings and hearings and so forth. I can appreciate Ms. Hassinger's position that the planning board is hearing a new project that has 14 years of history to it. To that point, I was very surprised that I'm sitting here in a planning board meeting discussing determination of completeness and recommendation when over these 14 years, it was my understanding, many discussions with not only this 40B, but other 40Bs, that the Zoning Board of Appeals acts as the planning board normally would. So to that point, let me start by saying, perhaps if the planning board is forced to have to make a recommendation, rather than do it completely blindly, it may want to not take a vote or make a recommendation until it gets a formal recommendation or feedback from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals, I believe only one member and myself have that 14-year history, and he's sitting there with you tonight. There's a lot going on. There's been a substantial amount of progress made over the last 3 years since the top, or more, since the top course went down on the roads. But there's a lot to this. Lastly, if I may, yes, I've worked on the last 15 years worth or more worth of 40Bs with the ZBA. This is the first one that was designed and constructed as a true, what appears to be a true subdivision. The others were multifamilies that would not go through the road acceptance process. But nevertheless, they did get a thorough vetting of completeness of construction and fulfillment of constructing the obligations for the driveways and so forth. Because I was involved with 2 of those that have been formally closed out so far. Those being Flint Pond Estates and the name escapes me, but the project off of Milford Road. So that's where I'm at from the more administrative side of things, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Again, I was a little surprised at this late hour. We're shifting forums from the ZBA to the planning board, but nevertheless, I'm here to answer the questions I can and give you my opinions if you want them.
Okay. Let's see. As long as claiming saying how long we've been involved in this, I've been involved in it a lot longer. We had a subdivision there for Mr. Ingrani before the planning board. I don't know, probably started 20 years ago, maybe.
More than that.
Yeah, I don't remember the date. I'm not sure who said that, but I don't know the date. After he filed the 40B while he still was before the planning board with his regular subdivision, non-40B subdivision, and eventually, I guess he terminated the action with us. The planning board, as this was the first time we had had a real 40B, the planning board appointed me to be a liaison or an observer or contributor in whatever way to the 40B process before the ZBA. And I was there at many of the hearings and made a number of comments, including encouraging taking advantage of the planning board's expertise in the management of a 40B or a subdivision within whatever limits were possible. And I was told then, I believe by the applicants, that no, that couldn't be done. Now we're back 17, 18, 19, 20 years later. So for what that's worth. Does anybody else have anything before we get into, okay, Bill?
Yeah, so just kind of following up a little bit with what Jeff said as far as input from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So as you know, as frustrated as the planning board may feel because they're getting into this, 14 years after it started, 20 years after it started, I think the ZBA might feel a little bit the same way, in so much as we're not necessarily familiar with what the road and subdivision acceptance process is. So we're being asked to do something that we don't necessarily know a whole lot about, which is somewhat typical in 40Bs. So maybe I'm going to suggest 2 different things. One is to help maybe both the ZBA, the planning board, and the applicant understand why we're here tonight. Maybe, presumably this gets continued, and maybe we could get town council, and I say both of them, Jenny Kramer and Dan Hill, to join us here in a meeting and explain it. And then including kind of the parameters and the bounds for which the planning board needs to operate and the ZBA needs to operate. And then the second piece of that, maybe we just need to have a joint meeting of the ZBA and the planning board, get us all in the room together, or in the Zoom room together, and talk through the process, and if necessary, what we'll pick our brains for what we know about this, but as Jeff pointed out, I'm really the only one that's been here from the start. In the 40B process, I think is at the 20-year point right now. So it's been a long process, and one way or another we got to get through it. So maybe working together might be the way to do it. So those are two suggestions I have at this point.
Yes. I'd like us to have written input from the town's council, so that in advance of whatever we do, so that we have a chance to study it and think about it.
There is a, I don't know if it's a letter or an email, but there is communication from Attorney Kramer to support why we're here. That they would be a starting point, but sure, get some input from both of them to try and help us all understand why we're here.
Yeah, that wasn't shared with us as far as I know. Not in our meeting materials. And I think
Understood.
maybe we need to hear from both councils. Okay. Did we hear from Jeff about the technical side?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with the construction letter. My latest and greatest was issued on September 23rd. For the past, 3 years or so, we've been working through what one might call the punch list or the determination of completeness process with respect to items that were not fully completed. In my opinion, as of the writing of my letter on September 23rd, things that I expected to be addressed could be addressed and were addressed. Not to say it agrees with everybody's perception as far as residents go, with respect to, say, the drainage running onto the lot, one of the lots there, but nevertheless, the biggest problem I was having on a physical side was ice that was occurring on High Point Drive sidewalk, just downhill from Arrowwood Court, and that was last seen not the winter that went by almost a year ago, but the winter before that. Last winter that went by, the icing didn't occur, and there was a number of modifications made to a drainage system at the intersection of Arrowwood and High Point that we've even tested out with 2 hydraulic tests, and I won't guarantee the town or either board that it works. It's a far cry from what was occurring 2 winters ago, in that water that was alleged to be snow melt more than anything else by the developer that would run down Arrowwood Court and get onto the sidewalk of High Point Drive and freeze. That's now being captured in a stone-filled depression, if you will. It was excavated out, filled with stone, and it has some drainage pipes in it that tie into the town's drainage, not the town's drainage system, the drainage system that would be accepted by the town if the town so chooses. That seems to capture the water, and the hydraulic test showed that the water can be conveyed to one of the stormwater basins. Aside from that, there was a number of more miscellaneous types of issues that have been pecked away at over the last 2 or 3 years. Stabilization, a few trees, cleaning up rocks, stabilizing lots that were being developed, except for the 3 that still have to be developed. There's always been discussion about the drainage issue going down to what's referred to as Lot 76. There's been arguments made, reports issued on behalf of the applicant that I can neither corroborate nor refute, in that they're arguing that the conditions now with the stabilization, the grass surfaces, the mature vegetative cover are not the same ground cover conditions back when the complaints were coming about, when the upgradient lots were bare soil and being developed, and the bare soil was creating a lot more runoff than what the grassy areas are now. And the fact that a temporary settling basin that was employed during that construction was in fact left in place, and they're arguing that that's serving a function to help mitigate the situation as well. Again, I can't corroborate it, but I certainly can't refute it. The reasoning is logical. They've made arguments to look, we've been out here and in these drainage channels that would see water if water flowed. There's leaf litter here from last fall, almost roughly 9 months ago. Yeah, I saw the same leaf litter. So again, I won't corroborate it, but I saw the same leaf litter, so I can't refute it either. That's where we're at on the construction side. On the documentation side, the acceptance plans, the as-built plans, the legal descriptions. We've been having some go around. My letter of last Friday, the 2nd, called, basically had what I would consider minor issues that needed to be addressed. It's just, it's been part of this process that it's taken multiple iterations sometimes of these things to get the documents we needed. Nevertheless, to Mr. Robbins' point about the legal descriptions around the open space, absolutely, there is an older set of descriptions that had some inconsistencies with the plans. I did review some updated descriptions a few months ago, and yep, painstakingly went through the meets and bounds around the perimeters, and they were in order. Likewise with the easement descriptions and so forth called out in my October 2nd letter. Again, some of the older documents got put into the bound document that you guys received, that the planning board received. Nevertheless, we're about there as long as the applicant would make clear to the planning board that 3 issues are going to be addressed. Namely, 1, there's a basin down as you're coming up the right side of the street behind lots 48 and 49. There were 2 easements, one on lot 48 and one on lot 49. I had access to one of the stormwater basins that would be maintained by the town if the town accepted the subdivision. Those easements a few months ago came off the table, causing problems with access around one end of the basin. I understand the easements are back on the table and would be conveyed to the town as long as the meets and bounds and acceptance plans fully show that. So those are 2 points, 1 point for each easement. And the other point is up off of Pepperbush Court, which is the cul-de-sac near the top of the hill. There was a stormwater basin that does not receive road runoff. That receives runoff from a couple of lots. That was a modification during the construction phase of the process, whereby it eliminated a long run of drainage infrastructure that would have been running around the perimeter of the property to convey stormwater from that area down to the stormwater basin at the bottom of the hill. That stormwater system was eliminated in favor with a basin up at the top of the hill. The question becomes whether or not the applicant is still pursuing that the town accept that basin off of Pepperbush or not. There's been discussion both ways, and it's not fully clear where my position is right now. Those are the 3 major issues I feel that probably can be addressed with a short discussion and followed up with documentation possibly. And lastly, back to my letter of October 2nd, the documentation just needs to be tightened up with the points that are still not quite in order. That's what I have for you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I, for one, look for a clean report from Jeff before I agree to any acceptance. I'm going to have to see a report that says that all the bases have been covered before I'll be satisfied. Any questions or comments on Jeff's input?
We just, kind of second what you just said, Bob, is as I mentioned before, it's clear that we're not under any time pressure here. So I think I would certainly want the board to forward a positive recommendation to the select board only at the point where all known issues have been resolved to the best of everybody's ability.
Well, it's, yes, and we have a report that shows us that, tells us that.
Documented.
Yeah.
Yes, document the results, and like I said, as long as we're not under any time pressure, there's no reason why we can't get all the I's dotted and T's crossed.
Right. All right. Does anybody else have something right now before I go to input?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment on those last couple comments. Thank you.
Go.
Also, I might ask Pat Gartner to have a brief response just to the last couple points that Mr. Walsh raised. I think he probably has a short just update to the board as to where those items stand. And just to make sure we're all clear, we have two different reports from Mr. Walsh, one dealing with the status of construction, the second dealing with the status of public acceptance documents. I think the status of the construction report is I think fairly clear and is providing what the chair and member Robbins, I believe, were looking for. And I think that's really what goes to the determination of completeness that we're asking this board to initially take action on. And as for the second report, the one from Friday, October 2nd, that still had some loose ends to tie up, if I could just quickly pass it over to Mr. Gardner, the project engineer, and maybe you could just give us a short response as to where he's at as far as responding to those items.
Yeah, this is Patrick Gardner. We did send out revised plans and various legal documents to Jeff late Friday afternoon. As far as we know, we've taken care of all of Jeff's issues, and of course, I realize hearing from the planning board that they're going to want to see that in writing and confirmation from Jeff. But we have added the easements to the back of 48 and 49 that Jeff is referring to. Actually, Don Bordenstein's firm did some research into an earlier document that goes back a number of years that we thought eliminated those easements, but then it turned out that subsequent conveyances of those lots made no reference to the recorded easement, and the legal opinion was that, in fact, consequently, the recorded plan had no bearing. So we've added those back. They were part of the original subdivision approval, and they're there now for the maintenance of that basin. And then in regards to the basin in the back of 41, we got feedback from the DPW director to the applicant that the town, in fact, had no interest in trying to maintain that. So we've taken that easement out. We're not asking the town to do that. And there's also a 10-foot drainage easement that runs behind lots 34 and 40 into that basin. And we've eliminated that as well because it obviously ties into the easement around 41. So all of that's been taken out, and the current documents before the town don't suggest that the town should accept that or maintain it over time.
We've never seen these plans. We don't know anything about that. But if you needed to have some sort of a drainage arrangement and the town doesn't accept it, who maintains it? Who's responsible for maintaining it?
That's a good question, and I think I'm going to bounce that one back to Don to deal with.
Don?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that that's a basin that serves only drainage coming off of two lots, 40 and 41, is what I'm understanding. So that would, if it's not accepted by the town, and I understand DPW has communicated that they prefer not to accept it, that appears to be Mr. Walsh's recommendation as well, then it would remain, open to, to private maintenance, private upkeep from the lots that benefit from it, 40 and 41.
Yeah, Don, it's probably worth me noting also that the swale basically that runs through the 10-foot easement behind 40 and 34 has never been observed to carry any runoff under any storm conditions. It was designed to do so, but it may in fact have been overly built and just be there. Similarly, the basin behind 41, I'm going to say, has shown no indications of flow flowing into it or out of it. So it may be a moot point, but I'm only speaking sort of practically and not legally.
Anything else? Okay, I see we have over in chat, we have a comment. I'm going basically to public input now for the hearing. Chris.
Yeah, I can read that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So the comment is from Michael Elliott. And his comment is, my name is Michael Elliott, resident of 19 High Point Drive. I wanted to express concern regarding the town accepting the road. The reasons for my concern are regarding the ugly and potentially unsafe state that unsold and unfinished lots. These include lots where basements were dug out but no home was placed, as well as other significantly large piles of dirt and general construction remaining in a state of disarray. As a resident, I am not sure what we can do to ensure these are not left this way. And he just wanted to make sure his comment was captured. So yeah, that is the correct process. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I did, I've been receiving comments from the residents of this subdivision, and I did have a chance to go out and take a look at the site and the lots that are unfinished. And as we've kind of discussed, I think that is more on the Zoning Board of Appeals site, but I did notice just anecdotally that there is some woody vegetation and a lot of the fencing, and I think construction safety improvements that were on site have appeared to have kind of failed or are starting to deteriorate in terms of the snow fencing, the orange snow fencing, and some of those things. The siltation seem to be still in place, or the erosion barriers seem to be still in place and well maintained. But again, I think that's a separate process. But just as a note, I think it'd behoove the developer to, if they can, to go out and kind of maybe police some of that the unfinished, undeveloped lots and just kind of clean them up. I don't, obviously I understand there's pending litigation, so I don't know to what extent that can be done, but in terms of the stop work order, but I think in terms of any of the safety concerns, it would be beneficial to have that cleaned up.
Okay. This is where we would, if we were in the room, people would raise their hand and ask to be recognized to make inputs. I think Chris outlined.
Yep. So we do have, sorry, we have a hand. I just have to find it. Trey Phillips.
Is he?
Yep. I will allow to talk.
There. Oh.
Appreciate that. Thanks for letting me join the meeting there and add some comments. I appreciate you having the forum like this where we could speak publicly. I live at 97 High Point Drive. I actually abut a couple of the undeveloped lots towards the front of the neighborhood. And I just think that, as you probably saw in the public comments that were submitted from numerous people that live in the neighborhood, that some of the drainage issues that that can't be corroborated or refuted at this point as far as if they've been fixed or not. I can assure you, living here, that they have not been addressed or fixed completely. At least that if I was the person in charge of if I should take over the neighborhood or not, I wouldn't think that it's in the condition to do so yet. So that was just the feedback I wanted to address, and I think it was important that this planning board hear that, since you haven't really been able to interact in this project over the years, and maybe hear from the residents that live here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else out there who wants to provide input to the hearing at this point? I have a hand. Is that another hand? No.
There is some Q&A, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay.
I'll ask, you might want to review and see if it's productive to the meeting to be acknowledged or not, but I'm happy to address it if needed.
I think we should let the question be asked.
Understood.
Be asked.
So the Q&A, this is from Nancy Piccone. Is Patrick Garner even an engineer? I disagree with many of his plans. So I'll just answer. Patrick Garner is a registered engineer. And then Nancy Piccone, doesn't infrastructure include drainage? And again, I'll answer that I would say that it would. Infrastructure is, drainage is included in infrastructure.
I would
Yeah.
certainly.
Chris, Mr. Chair, if I may, I am not a registered engineer, and I don't purport to be one. But my firm has that expertise on board, and I've simply been involved in the design process and construction of this from the beginning, sort of like Bill McCusker and Jeff, and so I'm playing that role. But I don't hold myself out as an engineer, and I'm not offering opinions as one.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. I would think certainly infrastructure that uses the connects to town, or what would become town facilities, would be relevant. I don't know the case we just talked about where it's not going to be connected to the town. I don't know. Is there anyone else who wants to make input at this point? Do I see something? I can't tell what I'm seeing here.
I do have there's a David Savage with his hand up.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. This is Dave Savage at 4 Pepperbush Court. So wanted to just touch base on a couple of things. One question, there was a comment or reference to, I guess, a catch basin up on Pepperbush in the cul-de-sac area, and whether or not the town might not want to accept that as part of the roads. I guess my question there is there any form of acceptance that would include High Point Drive and not also Pepperbush Court? So that's question one. And then the second question I would have is, you had made a comment earlier on about the open space being a separate process from the roads and infrastructure. So that does not go through this board or this process and has to be done separately. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to ask you if you could repeat that second part. I just want to make sure I understood the question.
The part about the open space acceptance?
Right.
Yeah, I just want to understand. So it's a two-part process, so they can separate that out and do the open space separately, or should that not be part and parcel with the overall town acceptance? I mean, the town is is going to have the acceptance for both at some point, or are they going, is there a situation we can envision where the town might accept one but not the other? Because I don't think they could accept the open space and not the roads and towns, the infrastructure to get to it. Right. So I kind of see them as part and parcel together, and just kind of wondering how it's separated and processed.
Understood. So, yeah, so my understanding is that since we have the ZBA process and the planning board process, in a sense, moving in parallel, I would defer to the board. I think the open space, the planning board may wish to either include that in their recommendation, or if they chose to remain silent on that regard, then that would have to be handled through the ZBA process. Mr. Robbins, do you have a clarification?
There is a very definite distinction. There is a well-defined process for accepting the roadway and associated infrastructure, which would be roadway, any utilities that the town would be taking responsibility for, the drainage, that which, the infrastructure that the town is taking responsibility for formally. That's a formal process, which this is a part of, that this board has to make find a determination of completeness. The recommendation is then forwarded to the select board. The select board holds a hearing on the acceptance of the roadway and infrastructure, and that proceeds to a town meeting vote. The acceptance of open space by the town is much less formal. There is no formally defined process for that. It typically takes place by either a developer on their own initiative offering open space to the town, or as part of an agreed upon plan, subdivision plan, or in this case, a 40B plan or comprehensive permit. The open space, a requirement for open space is very often included in that plan, but there is no formal procedure such as there is for accepting the roadway. It's basically when the project is done, at some point during the project, doesn't even have to wait till the project is done. The developer offers to the town, or on occasion the town acquires open space by purchasing it, but in a subdivision it's typically more the developer gives to the town, and the town meeting accepts the open space, and any conditions governing the open space would generally be written into either the definitive plan approval on a subdivision or the comprehensive permit in the case of a 40B. But it doesn't follow the same kind of process that we're working on tonight for the roadways.
Bill, can you tell us anything about that?
Probably no more than Mr. Robbins just said. The relationship between the infrastructure and the open space, I'm not sure why the citizen thought they were so tightly tied together. Generally speaking, there is access to the open space directly from some roads. However, there is also access by way of easements across private property. I believe those easements should already be in people's deeds. So, I don't have really anything else to add to what Mr. Robbins said. I can definitely understand what would be definitely a separate process for the open space.
Yeah, I don't think that we know anything about the open space, where it came from, why, what's promised, and so on. Is it a necessary portion of the condition on the project?
Oh, okay.
I may chip in one thing here.
Well, so yes, it is definitely part of the comprehensive permit. There's conditions in there that say that sections of space as defined on a plan are to be left as open space. There's definitions of access, trail access to them. They had to actually construct a trail, which they did, a few different trails. It's actually kind of a nice walk around the perimeter of that project. So there is quite a bit to the open space defined within the comprehensive permit. It's definitely a part of this. It's not just like some land that's left over and he's going to donate it to the town. It was very much a part of the plan and the conditions within the comprehensive permit.
But the transfer of it,
Yeah,
is required to be transferred to the town.
I would think so, Bob, but I don't know. I don't know without going back and looking at what it says in the comprehensive permit about that. I'm not sure.
Okay, Dave, someone have something.
I think I was going to say something, but I think Bill covered it.
Okay. All right. There's there's another input from Michael Elliott.
Yep. So Michael Elliott just making a light comment in response to the comment regarding state of development being completed, being covered elsewhere. Could you repeat again what the correct forum is to bring up our concern of undeveloped lot state? And so just to reiterate, I think the completion of the remaining lots is more of a zoning board of appeals matter. I think in terms of bringing it up in this form, I think that's fine. But it's more the zoning board of appeals. So I would, ask the developer to be cognizant of that resident concern. But beyond that, this board wouldn't have any purview further than that.
Okay. So, do we have anyone else who would like to make input to the hearing at this point?
So I have one hand up from E. Petrie, and I also have two comments in Q&A, whichever you'd like to cover first.
Two new ones in Q&A?
Correct.
I don't, okay. Oh, why don't you do the Q&A?
Yep. So this is Susan Craig. I live at 94 High Point Drive. I have an easement that the developer agreed to move on paper with the town. I still don't see it done. So the easement, I don't know if Attorney Borenstein, if you're aware of that one and have an update on that, or?
I don't know by the property address which lot we're talking about there. I don't know if Patrick has any more information on that.
Yeah, Don, that's totally news to me. We haven't been contacted by this individual, and I'm not familiar with what she's referring to. If she could get directly to us, we'd be happy to respond.
Yeah, she mentioned lot 3, but
yeah, there's an easement in the back of lot 3. There's a drainage easement that's shown on all of the plans. There's a large physical swale behind 3. Actually, it goes behind 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it carries water down into the basin behind lot 1. But that's shown on the as-built plans, and it should be shown on the acceptance plans. It's part of the grant of easement legal descriptions.
Mr. Chair and Chris, I do see Susan Craig did add her raise her hand on the thing to speak if that wants to be recognized or not.
Yeah.
This is the person that was just talking about that item.
Yeah, I'm confused. I thought that was the comment that was being addressed.
it was, and then she raised her hand, so I can allow her to talk if you'd like to recognize her.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi. So we built a wall in the back of our property, and a very small portion of it was on the easement. So we worked with the town. We moved the wall again, and then a very small portion of it, about 6
to 12 inches.
It's 100-foot wall, and about 6 feet of it, somewhere in there, is like half a foot on the easement. And so we went in front of the zoning board and conservation. We talked with you guys. We all agreed a number of years ago that we got a decision. You agreed it could stay, and Mr. Higurami was going to move the easement on paper. And he gave me a letter. We filed all of the paperwork per your instructions with the Worcester Registry of Deeds. But as I see today, it has not moved yet on paper. It is still in the same place. So, Attorney Bornstein, are you not aware of that? And if yes, I can forward that letter to you.
Yeah, so I am not title counsel for this project, but I am not personally aware of it.
Bill?
And I have to say, as the party doing the as-built on the property, I have not, this is the first I've heard of any of this.
Bill?
Well, we have a letter from Higurami, and we registered this with the deed. We went through the ZBA.
And conservation.
And conservation. We did all of this. They told us then to record it with the Registry of Worcester Deeds, and we did. And that's, at this point, it's up to Higurami to move that easement on paper. We have a letter stating he would do it, and it hasn't been done.
And you folks approving it, so we would expect you would support that happening before as part of infrastructure.
Okay, well, that sounds like a simple thing to take care of. It's unknown to me, but it sounds like if he's aware of it, I simply needed to get him to forward that to my firm so we can make that change on paper.
Okay. How do we, go ahead.
Bill is raising.
Yeah, so first of all, as chair of the ZBA, I apologize for not remembering the details. If you actually did come before us, of course, as I said, this project's been going on for 20 years. What I was going to ask is if Jeff has any recollection or knowledge. I thought when this came up, I actually looked like he might have been looking at plans or something. Do you remember this at all, Jeff?
I do remember visiting the site, I believe with town staff, I don't remember whom. I was made aware that a wall was constructed in that drain easement. I was advised sometime much later that the issue had been resolved, but I didn't know specifically how it had been resolved. And in my review of the acceptance plans and as-built plans, if I can recall that specific easement correctly, the acceptance plans follow the subdivision plans. So there's no change in the easement from 14 years ago. If there was something that was approved, an easement change, I don't recall being aware of it. I don't recall finding that in my files when I went through this more recently. But I do recall discussion back when we learned of the wall being in the easement of how much of an encroachment was it, and was the wall going to cause detriment in that the easement couldn't be used for the purpose the easement was intended to be for. So that's my long answer for I had been advised or was thought that it was resolved.
Yeah, and I concur with Jeff. The easement that's shown on the acceptance plans mirrors the approved plan from back in the day without any change of any kind. But it sounds like if there's some sort of an agreement, we just need to get a copy of what that is so we can make that change to the easement. As I recall, it's a 20-foot wide easement, so there's a lot of latitude to bump it a foot or two if we need to. So
yes, there is.
we just need to be aware of it.
Yeah. So what do we got to do for you guys? I mean, it's been recorded with the town. It's been recorded on our deed.
Who do we send it to?
What do you guys need? Who do we
Let
send
me
it
give
to?
you my email. Send it to me tomorrow morning. It's Patrick Garner at
Sorry, just because we are on
Yep.
a public forum, you may not want to give out your email.
Okay, can I give out my telephone?
If you
They can call me.
I'll give my email since mine is public record anyways, and the conversation can flow through me. I'll connect you to.
Great, sounds good. Okay, so I'll expect to see it at some point, and we'll make that change. That sounds like it's good to know, but we didn't know it. So
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Um,
Chris, have we caught up with everything in the Q&A?
No.
Okay. Bounce over there.
So I have added my email to the chat for anyone who's in need of it. I look forward to tomorrow morning. Sorry, just going through here. So we still have E. Petrie with the hand raised. Sorry. Eric Mayuri, between the builders, town officials, attorneys, chairman, does anyone know what is going on? I'm just going to dismiss that as unproductive. David Savage, my earlier question was not responded to, which was if the acceptance could be for just High Point Drive and not include Pepperbush Court because of the catch basin concern. My understanding is both roadways were to be accepted when all done, and I just want to confirm the acceptance must include both roadways at the same time. So I think the intent is to have both roadways included in the road acceptance, unless I'm mistaken in that. The intent is to include both.
Yeah, and may I make a clarification too? And Jeff can chime in here if he feels it's necessary, but there's never been a discussion about not including the catch basin. The whole roadway on Pepperbush from the end of the cul-de-sac down toward High Point flows downhill toward High Point. What we had been talking about is that in the back of lots 34 and 40, there's a 10-foot drain easement with an existing sort of riprap swale that goes down to the basin we were talking about maybe 45 minutes ago in the back of lot 41. That swale and the basin are not part, they don't accept road runoff from either Pepperbush or High Point. So the DPW has said that they were not eager to maintain those. So we've agreed to remove those from the subdivision, but that has nothing to do with Pepperbush as a roadway itself. And hopefully that was a clarification and not a confusion.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, the documentation I've seen for acceptance is always considered High Point Drive and Pepperbush Court. Acceptance is not being considered for the common driveways, which is customary with common driveways at the 48 project.
Right. In our subdivisions, no one's ever even suggested accepting common drives.
And we are not in this case.
Right. All right.
So the next comment is Nancy Piccone. There are utility boxes on my property where my driveway should be. They're in the wrong location per many of Mr. Garner's plans. How do I file a formal complaint to have them removed?
Anybody have an input to us? Chris?
So I'd have to look back at the utility box location. This is the first that I've heard that they've been misplaced or that a driveway has been misplaced. I can look into that.
So Chris, I was going to suggest that maybe, the approach that we've generally taken is that, the 40B changes the zoning laws, and then from there it becomes a matter of implementation by the zoning enforcement officer. So I think the complaint should either go to you or Bob. I think eventually it ends up, with the ZBA. I mean, if the plans say you're supposed to build X and they built Y, that's something that really falls in the lap of the ZBA, and we would need to address.
Okay. Do we still have at least one over in chat?
So there's No, none in chat, but we still have E. Petrie. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, with a hand up for allowing to talk.
Go.
All right, thank you very much, and you nailed the pronunciation. Well done. This is more of a procedural question, I think, than anything else. So, if and when the project and roadway is accepted by the town, I live at 98 High Point Drive, which is lot 1 on the plans. I have a detention basin on a drainage easement in my backyard, and I also abut the open space that's the entrance of the subdivision. What is the plan for maintenance of the medians? And there's a kind of a grass area in the front of the subdivision. The plan for maintenance of that, as well as the maintenance of the detention basins and the open space lot in the subdivision.
So, in terms of, so that, I think that would be a process that would, with the Board of Selectmen and the actual road acceptance at town meeting, that would specify exactly what's going to be transferred to the town. I believe typically, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe typically the maintenance of the median would be included in the town's maintenance. And so DPW would have to kind of consider that, as well as any of the other infrastructure that they would be taking over responsibility for.
There's some land, which I don't have drawings here handy. This land down on Adams Road, isn't there? And I don't know what the status of that is. That I think that even includes the old, whatever it was, mill or something that's been falling apart.
Correct.
Yeah, Bob, that's part of the open space.
So it would be going to all that would be going to the town.
Correct.
And the town wouldn't have any. What obligation would the town have to maintain that in any particular way?
Not for me to say.
Chris, any idea?
In terms of the particular obligation, I mean, I think that'd be something that DPW might be better able to respond to. I hesitate to answer just because I understand that DPW has limited resources, and I'm not sure what particular maintenance plan they would want to commit to.
Yeah, and that's precisely my concern, because obviously there's motivation by the developer to, for upkeep and whatnot, as there are still lots, there were still lots up for sale. But once that is no longer the case and is transferred to the town, there is, again, it's not lack of motivation as much as lack of resources. So is that something that would be, is that level of detail provided at town meeting as far as what the town would specifically be committing to by accepting the development in the roadway?
I wonder if that would be presented at town meeting unless specifically raised. Don't usually see that level of discussion. For myself, I would hope that the town would insist on the condition of that land being reasonable before it's transferred. As I say, there's the whatever it was, a wooden structure that's been falling apart and falling apart and falling apart. Last time I looked, though, it was still there, and I would think that would need to be dealt with and resolved before the town would want to be taking any responsibility for that area, whether or not the town maintains a nice entrance to there, or just leaves the land as open land.
So, you know, I understand all the discussion about the land at the front of the development. You know, I think what maybe is more concerning is there's a tot lot at the back of the development, which is on the open space, which has some swing sets and other equipment. And that's all part of the open space, and that's all going to become town property. And I'm not sure who's going to be responsible for maintaining that, who's responsible for liability of that. You know, it's one of these things that, you know, at the time it seemed like a good idea to have this open space and to have them build a tot lot so there was some place for the kids to play. But, you know, I don't know that it was really thought through as far as who's actually going to own this and maintain it and be responsible for it. I think it's a very big open issue, quite frankly.
Maybe there should be some consulting by daytime people, Chris, with DPW and or whoever else is appropriate to get a handle on this. We're looking for recommendations to town meeting. This will certainly be an issue if it isn't adequately resolved.
Yeah, and I think before we get there, we would address that. And I just tonight I hesitate because I don't want to make commitments for DPW where I haven't consulted with them.
I think you need to talk to them and then find out where we stand on that and where they stand on it, and then we can talk.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, we're talking about the open space here in the tot lot. And you know, in the course of my work in reviewing open space for the open space and recreation plan and reviewing what we have and you know, what's been laid out at various places, I've noticed several instances of subdivisions where they've set aside space for a tot lot or a playground. Nothing's ever been developed there. And so a fair amount of the open space that's currently under the town's ownership is just there. It's not maintained for any particular purpose. It's just left in its natural state. And sometimes there are, you know, trails cross it and sometimes not. And this, so far as I know, this open space is not designated to go under control of the Conservation Commission, say, which a fair number of our open space parcels do end up under control of the Conservation Commission, and they're basically also, you know, preserved in their natural state, sometimes with some recreation, you know, facilities there. A tot lot would most naturally fall under the jurisdiction or the administration of the Recreation Commission, who is responsible for various parks and playgrounds around town. It would seem logical that the Recreation Commission would become responsible specifically for the existing tot lot. More generally, the maintenance of the open space, you know, unless we, you know, for the most part in this situation, the open space is just left open and nothing's really done with it. But the town owns it and the town is responsible for it. And I don't suppose anybody necessarily thinks too much about, well, what exactly should we be doing with it? Who's responsible for what and how are we going to manage it? All of that, however, is not within the context of the roadway acceptance. It's a whole other thing. And that, by and large, the roadway acceptance, you know, we're here because it's been decided that the planning board is going to deal with the roadway acceptance. The rest of it, including the disposition, the ultimate disposition of open space, I think that's back in Bill's court there with the ZBA.
I appreciate that, just with the open space, but also the detention basins. And I'm understanding, I think, from this discussion that the drainage infrastructure goes hand in hand with the roadway infrastructure as far as accepting. So I'm assuming that the town, the DPW, would assume maintenance of those detention basins then as part of the roadway acceptance?
That is customary to my knowledge. When the town accepts the roadways and the drainage, the town accepts the responsibility for maintaining them, whether they like it or not.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion. And I would like to, if it's possible, to have more detail before this is brought up to town meeting as far as what exactly roadway acceptance means, I think would be great.
How does it get decided whether it'll go under Concom or not? I know sometimes, I'm not sure, it's always been a little unclear to me. Could that property at the front, for example, go to Concom?
So, I vaguely recall some 40B I thought that we were working with where there was going to be some open space that was going to go to Concom. And it might have even been this one, but then I hate to keep saying it 20 years, but it's been a long time. And, I also maybe remember, maybe we tried to say it has to go to Concom, but for some reason we couldn't. But, I do think a quick review of the conditions in the permit is warranted with respect to that open space again. It's possible that maybe it's supposed to be going to Concom, and I just don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill, I'm going to interject here because we've just recently gone through the conservation process to get a certificate of compliance. And that same issue came up before them. Who's getting the open space? And our response has been whoever wants it. I mean, if it's appropriate to go to the commission, that's great. If the town wants it, that's great. Because it largely abuts the Hennessy property, it makes sense to. I mean, it's a choice piece of property. It's more than 30 acres, and you're very familiar with it, so it's got no downsides to it. But whether it goes to the selectmen or the town or the Conservation Commission, the owner is totally open to whatever the town wants.
Understood.
I'm interested in, I don't think the 30 acres you're talking about are the ones down at the front.
Bob, they are. They're all part of the same chunk. They're two large, well, they're two parcels. There's one that abuts Adams Road, sweeps around the entire back of all. And then there's an interior parcel that sort of sits in the center of the parcel. I don't recall what the acreage of that is, but it's several acres. But the frontage starts on Adams, winds all the way around, butts up against the Hennessy property.
I lose you every so. Right now, I've lost you, Patrick. You frozen up on my screen.
For what it's worth, excuse me, the interior parcel is 1.4 acres. And there's another small 1.2 acre sliver of open space on the south side of High Point Drive, starting just off of Adams Road and going up to the first house lot there. But the bulk of it, as he said, it's a little over 30 acres, and it definitely abuts the Hennessy property. The town might ultimately consider placing a portion of this, if not all of it, under Concom control. But that's really yet to be decided. It's worth having that discussion in town about what we think the town would best, how the town could best utilize this open space.
Okay. We have another hearing we need to do tonight, so let's see do we have any more unaccepted or unaddressed input, Chris?
I believe that I do see Susan Craig's hand is up, but that might be from previous. Let me just unmute real quick in case. Oh, and it's down. So that should be it. I don't see any other comments or questions open.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have to continue this hearing. And so if we've missed somebody, you can submit your input through the website, through the mechanism that's there to submit comments on this, and or come to whenever we address this the next time.
Our next two meeting dates, Mr. Chair, are October 26th or November 9th.
November 9th. Do the applicants have any input on that?
I have a short statement, Mr. Chairman. I guess, remember, this is a process that began back in March. I know the planning board wasn't involved at that point. As we started this meeting with, I'd just like to end with the idea of what the scope of what we're trying to do here is, and that's to come up with a determination of completeness. The determination of completeness is almost entirely based on a determination of whether the infrastructure of the project has met the subdivision regulations. I've yet to hear a comment tonight that that indicates otherwise. I think all the information before the board is that the infrastructure does meet, the construction condition does meet the conditions of the subdivision regs. And if it doesn't, we'd very much like the input from the board as to how it doesn't, so we can make progress on this. So if there's any thoughts or determination by the board that there are elements of the subdivision infrastructure that don't meet the subdivision regulations, we should be told about that so we can address it, bring this process to the end, a process I'm sure the planning board would like to bring to an end as well. So with that, I just focusing on our task at hand, which is the determination of completeness. Do we have any direction, any comment as to ways in which we believe the project to not be complete?
I'd have to reiterate what I said in the beginning. We just got this, and we're used to a process where throughout we take a look at what's going on and where we see the whole process of the completion from beginning to end. We haven't been involved in this at that level in this project at all. So for us to make a determination when it's just been thrown in front of us, I think it's impossible. And I also agree with Bill that what probably needs to happen from our side is we need to have a Zoom meeting with the ZBA and get us up to speed a little bit as to what we're really looking at. I can't even begin to, we need to have completion from Jeff Walsh. We pull everything together, and when we make a determination of completion, we've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and we don't have that at this point. So I don't think we're going to get anywhere tonight. I think we do have to think about getting together with Bill and maybe even with Jeff and talking about it in a little more depth as to where we stand.
There have been numerous questions, concerns raised, and until I'm satisfied that they've been addressed, I can't say okay. And that starts with the first thing I think I talked about, which was inputs from our council explaining this, how this gets to us, what we should or shouldn't do or look at, and so on and so on, as a starting point. But there are also, I don't think Jeff has said that everything he looks at is okay, that we need to look at. So if you want us to close the hearing tonight and make a decision, I'll make a decision based on that.
And I will say, I haven't said much on what I feel I need for this particular thing, but at the very least, seeing in writing from the town council on what our limits of things to consider are, what we're actually voting on, what impacts it has to the town, in terms of determining the completeness, that will help me wrap my head around which specific parts of this 14, 20 year, however we're measuring it, project I need to be familiar with, I need to understand, and then what concerns I may have for preventing me from being okay voting a yes. And I just don't, without seeing what my limits are in that aspect, I don't have that concrete answer for the applicant on what I would need.
No, Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate the comments of Member Hassinger and Member Wood. I mean, I feel some of the same frustration, and I don't envy the planning board in the position that you've been put in hearing this matter tonight. But the applicant team is very much interested in bringing this process to a close. And the planning board tells us to show up on a date, we'll show up on a date like we did tonight. If we can start narrowing in towards an endpoint to this, that's what we'd appreciate. If there's any feedback for us to get tonight, we'd love to have it. I think we've demonstrated, especially over the recent months and recent years, a willingness to take that direction and act on it. And it's that direction we're looking for. And if we don't have that tonight, but we have a direction to show up at another meeting date when you have some clearer direction from your council. I had suggested and wished this had stayed with the zoning board that has a long history of it, to continue the process that I thought we made good progress on in June. But that's not the circumstance we find ourselves in tonight. So we want to know what to do so we can finish this process and satisfy the completeness standard, and we'll stand by and be ready to do that.
This board's custom is to grant requests for a continuation, not do a continuation on our own. That's the way we've always worked. If you want to request a continuation, do so.
I guess I'm not even quite sure what we're requesting continuation of, so maybe I could get a little input there. I mean, we're following the direction that the town has given us. Town council gave us direction to come to this board. We came to this board.
Mr. Chairman.
Somebody.
If I may, so I think just to clarify a couple things, I think obviously in terms of direction and moving forward and having a list of kind of items to work on in between now and then, I think, as you noted, the council input on the scope that the board is voting on, I'll happily try and get that clarified with town council. I think there were, the 3 items that Jeff Walsh brought up as, minimum items to be addressed. I think those are something that can be worked on in the meantime. I think in terms of the public comments that came out tonight, I think town council, when I have that kind of scope narrowed with them, I think that'll give us a clearer picture of which ones of those concerns can be addressed. So although I don't have the punch list kind of written out tonight, I think, I'd be happy to kind of collate those in coordination with town council to review and actually have those before the next meeting, just to clarify in terms of the continuation and that discussion, so that this is a public hearing for the determination of completeness. And so a continuation request would be for that public hearing.
If I may add to your list, Chris, one thing that might be worth doing, this would probably come based on what our attorney comes back with us about, is if we can fit a public meeting outside of a public hearing meeting, along with either us and jointly with the ZBA, or us, with Bill and maybe Jeff Walsh, depending on what we think we need, to help give us some of that background that could, even though I don't think we need an expedition in terms of this particular project, based on what David Robbins has said earlier, that can certainly help us be able to be more prepared at the next public hearing for this project.
I think that I would want council to advise us about how to go about doing something like that. This is a public hearing announced by the planning board. If we address it.
So in terms of coordinating a joint hearing between the ZBA and the planning board, what that would entail is staff, presumably myself, would coordinate with the chairman and members of the boards to find a time that would work to hold a special meeting just for this process. It would be advertised similar, the same as a regular meeting in terms of the hearing notice published with the clerk, and then that joint meeting would proceed from there.
Yeah, and To be clear, I'm not suggesting we need a separate meeting just for this. This is if it falls within the scope of what we can do reasonably, if we can get some like the background on this project that people have felt we need, including myself, then outside of the the lengthy public hearing process, so to speak, that could help in knowing what the scope is. But yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, as I was saying, the purpose of the public hearing is to collect input, right?
Yes.
And certainly the ZBA can be a source of your input. So I envisioned that you would continue the public hearing, and the ZBA would join you perhaps at the next continuation date. Obviously, if we are going to have a quorum of our members, we would have to post that, an agenda, et cetera, and we would be conducting a meeting simultaneously to your meeting, a joint meeting. So I envisioned that it could be done as part of the public hearing process. However, that all being said, I also kind of agree with Bob. I want council to weigh in and make sure we do this correctly, for sure. But I just envision it to be part of the public hearing process.
That sounds right to me. I don't want to have two separate hearings going on at the same time. And so I think Bill's got it exactly right. Does the applicant want to request a continuation?
Hey, Bob, if I may, I do notice there's one more in the Q&A. And Nancy Bacconi's asking who she files a complaint with, I think. And if I may, I'm just going to suggest that Nancy should just send a letter. I think it really should go to Bob Berger as the zoning enforcement officer, but she wants to send it to the ZBA. It's something that we need to figure out whether it's an issue for the comprehensive permit or whether it's an issue between a couple of landowners. But I think the best answer for her is to probably send something either to the zoning enforcement officer or to the ZBA chair, through the town, and we'll have to try and deal with it that way.
Okay. Last time, does the applicant want to request a continuation of the hearing?
We certainly don't want a denial, so we can certainly be here on the 26th or the 9th, so we would.
Which would be better? Which would you prefer?
The 26th works a little bit better personally for my schedule, to be honest with you. So the 26th, and I just want to make sure that would, that's 3 weeks. I'm assuming that would be enough time for Mr. Walsh to review what Pat Gardner gave him late on Friday. So that's really the only timing concern I had. So if that's good with Jeff, then the 26th is good with me, and I suspect the rest of the applicant team will make themselves available.
Right. We'll, since we're doing this by Zoom, we've been doing this that we expect you to provide a written request, and we'll act on the presumption that you do. We have forms that we usually use in person.
Email has been fine in our past review, just to be clear, email to the town plan.
So I take it that that's a request of the applicant to continue this hearing until October 26th at 7:30.
So moved. That we approve it, yes.
Moving approval request. Is that right? Justin?
Yeah, sorry. I was hearing a lot of static coming through on my end. Right. Yes, I was moving that we approve the applicant's forthcoming written request to continue to 26 at 7:30.
And I have a second here. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Dave?
Aye.
Justin?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabu?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. We'll see you on the 26th. Now then, we need to move along briskly. to our, I think it's our last real item, which is the request for a major residential special permit, MRSP 2020-08/PP, and preliminary plan approval at 61 Maple Avenue and so on. This is a continuation. Chris.
So the board will recall at the previous meeting, we were looking at modes of access, and the applicant stated that they were looking at a revised access and potential for that additional access route, noting that there's considerations in that regard. So in terms of the board's interpretation of the dead end road and the we'll call it the lollipop configuration, that's where we left off. I believe there was potential for progress on the additional access that was proposed. I'm not sure where that stands.
Okay. Does the applicant have anything to say to us at this point?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Stephen David, good evening. At the last meeting, we had some, I was with Norm from Land Planning and in his office, and we had some technical difficulties in getting on with the meeting, and the board initiated the meeting, and we didn't really get a chance to make a presentation. I am going to briefly describe what I would have said had we had the opportunity. This plan was designed based on a pre-submission hearing we had with some members of the departments, specifically the Concom. And at that meeting, Conservation recommended that we stay away from some of the sensitive conservation areas that are in the middle of this parcel. As a result, we designed the plan to go around that and come out. During the course of the design, we took pains to design a plan that was ultimately is compliant with the subdivision rules and regulations. We were able to acquire and make some agreements whereby we didn't need any waivers to construct this subdivision. Needless to say, at the last meeting, I was a little disappointed with the position the board took as it relates to the lollipop design, as Chris alluded to. So I did take the board seriously in some of their comments. I have explored different ways to get in. However, when I look at those ways, they create waivers that we're going to need, and it's going to deviate from our plan. During the course of doing that, I also listened carefully to the chairman. He alluded to some sort of a lawsuit. I did some research on that, and I provided a copy of that with a letter to the members to see if that would have any impact on the board's original impression as to the lollipop design. I only got that on Wednesday. I provided Chris with a letter on Thursday, and I wasn't sure that the members had enough time to either read that or look at that case. So, I'm happy to explore different alternatives, but I wanted to get additional guidance from the board relative to the access, because like I said, our plan is compliant and we'd like to move forward. And I just was looking for some comment from you, Mr. Chairman, and members relative to that issue initially.
Well, as I'm pretty sure we talked about last time, is not compliant. We have a set of rules about dead-end roads and a 30-year history with that. And that we also have research done that shows that our rules are quite similar to many others in the area and have stood for a long time. The case that you cited, I think that's Eden's subdivision. I read, that's the first time I've ever seen the decision for that case. That occurred before even I was on the board. I've been on, this is my 30th year on the board. That occurred in the latter half of the 80s, before I came on the board. I think the decision was what, 90 or 91?
That's correct.
But it was a several year process. And I think you may also have mentioned the condominiums that I can never think of the name of.
It's called Lord Vale, and it's actually mentioned in the decision, Mr. Chairman.
Lord Vale predates the current bylaw about how condos are done, and was approved through some sort of a process that involved the selectmen and with, I think, planning board input. But and I don't know what the rules were then before well, actually before I came on the board. The important point is, I read through that decision, and it centers around the question of a double-barreled road and how over years the consideration of that was handled. Apparently, at some point, rules and regulations included a possibility of a double-barreled road satisfying a longer dead-end road situation. That rule, I don't have subdivision rules back further than the spring of '91 when I joined the board. And that, what was cited in that decision doesn't appear in the rules and regulations as of the ones that I have. I believe that it was, whatever was there was removed at some point prior to '91. So the rule that we have now has existed and applied for at least 30 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't play a role also in how Lord Vale was dealt with in the 80s, in the earlier 80s. So that's the basic point.
Yeah. Well, I didn't come here tonight to discuss the legalities of it. I came here tonight actually for some guidance. So my problem is, I read the decision, and obviously my position is consistent with that decision. But I do want to try to, I can acquire another access in. The problem is if I do that, there's a ability for me to do that along Maple Street. But when I do that, it's going to trigger my entrance being within 600 feet of another entrance, and it's going to require a waiver. So I'm trying to, find out this evening if the board, in light of the fact that I am going to provide you with another access, would be amenable to granting me waivers of that nature. And this will help me in providing what I guess you want in terms of two accesses versus one in, one out. And that's primarily what I want to try to find out this evening, and I'd welcome some input from the chair as well as the other members.
Well, if you read through the Eden decision, it looks to me like a lot of it's centered on planning boards telling people what they could do, and that didn't work out very well. I'll tell you that in my recollection, we stick pretty close to the 600 feet as a rule. we'd have to look at the whole thing put together to, I think, to really say very much about whether there's a way to approve your particular situation. Anybody else? Chris?
Rob, I just had one question. I know Dead End Street is one issue which we have discussed in the last meeting, and today we are also discussing. But in some of the comments from Jeff from Graves and other abater comments, I think there are more things to be kind of cleared, right, in terms of number of units in industrial and residential, like a mixed zone. So I just want to make sure that we are not like stuck to one point and then uncover other things. We've passed one hurdle, but then there's something else facing us down the street.
Yeah, no, that's true. The basic geometry, though, is the starting point. All of those points obviously have to come up. I have no idea about what Jeff said. We have to drill into that a little bit more. I thought we did talk a little bit about part of that industrial thing, but obviously all the points that come up have to be looked at. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So the application right now is the preliminary subdivision plan and major residential special permit. So in terms of process, there is still the definitive subdivision process to go through. Obviously the board, I don't know if there's an appetite to do a conceptual plan of the other access, so it's not I guess cost prohibitive, but the board can kind of consider what that might look like, and if they would want to avoid a straw poll, but the only other way to do it would be the definitive proposal to include kind of options of development, and then the board and applicant could work through that way. But obviously at the definitive phase, it would need, both options would need to be significantly engineered in terms of plans. So the preliminary process might be better to hash that out, and the other concerns as noted by Mr. Dive.
Well, I think a lot of it centers on the special permit. As I recall, the submission requirements require a plan that's fully compliant with the rules and regulations to give us a starting point, a conventional plan that's compliant with the rules and regulations. So that question arises under the special permit as well as under the subdivision plan. We have to get to that.
I don't disagree with the chair. I'd like an opportunity to present a second means of egress into the subdivision. I think I've discussed this with Chris. Chris is correct. There is an engineering to show the board this evening. The other member is correct as well. There are other issues that I need to address. And I just got the engineering consultant's report. So there wasn't enough time to really put a lot of that together. So what I'd like to do in light of feedback that I've received, I'd like to continue this matter and come back with that information for the board's consideration.
Good.
I don't know what the meeting date.
If I may, before you continue to sort of say, my one thought on the distance piece for the applicants, thoughts for how I think about it is, I am definitely less personally concerned with the 600 feet, but I definitely don't want a situation where there is essentially you have two parallel roads that you can see the drivers of the neighboring cars just to, as a way to, skirt the dead end. I don't, and then they're like, 100 feet away from each other. So one tree can block both.
I'm not,
kind of what I don't want, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm just, that's kind of how I look at it. I would like it to be, two independent, paths, so to speak, for egress if there's, things like that. That's just how I look at it. But-
Well, I appreciate you articulating that, and we'll take it into consideration when we come back.
I think we're perfectly happy to engage in a process here where
Certainly.
you bring in something, we talk about it, make some more changes. I think that's probably the best from your point of view.
I'd like to do that, Mr. Chairman. That sounds like a good idea. So I just don't know the dates of the.
Our next two dates are October 26th or November 9th.
I would probably ask for the November 9th meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So that's a formal request for a continuation
Please.
To November 9th at 7:30.
I move that we accept the applicant's forthcoming written request to continue the hearing till November 9th at 7:30 p.m.
We're getting noise. Okay, there we go. Linda seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prebu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries. We'll see you on November 9th.